Hi, I'm Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government, and we're honored today to have one of the first television appearances of Phyllis Busansky, who is our new Supervisor of Elections. Congratulations on your election and being in that office. It's got to be a challenge.
It is, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
We're so excited that you chose us to come and be with, and let's find out a little bit about Phyllis, if you don't mind.
No, not at all, not at all.
Phyllis, you've served in other elected offices. What offices were they?
I actually served as a county commissioner for 2 terms at large, and then this.
That county commissioner was one thing, but this has got to be a whole different breed of cat.
Well, it is, and I actually was the first director of welfare reform for the state of Florida.
Really?
Yes, appointed by Lawton Childs, and I worked for Lawton and for Jeb Bush for 3 years, and then we moved it into workforce development. So.
How long have you been in the state of Florida? I may get a little bit of an accent there.
Right, I'm from Connecticut. I was born in West Hartford, Connecticut, and but we've lived here for 30 years, and so I don't have much of an accent. I don't think.
Just a little bit. Just it's like my outs and abouts. Being Canadian,
that's true,
I still have my little. People will say, "What is that?"
Yes, and I lived in Boston for many years, so that also kind of plays into the accent.
Now, you went to school up there?
Right. I went to Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts, and have a liberal arts degree. And then I went to the Heller School at Brandeis and have a master's in business. Yeah.
Wow. That's kind of neat. How about a family?
Oh, I have a great family. I've been married for almost 50 years, and I have 3 terrific children. If I didn't know my children, I would think they were terrific. I happen to know them, so.
Spoken like a real mother.
They're great.
Right?
No, but they are. One is, the oldest, Alex, is head of a foundation, the Washington office called Vera, which does criminal justice.
Wow.
And Edward lives here, and he is vice president of First Housing and an affordable housing program. And the other one is Rebecca, who does consulting and projects for the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. So I have 9 grandchildren. 9 grandchildren,
yes.
Too? Mm-hmm.
Well, see, you're a slacker, though. I just had Tom on, Commissioner Tom Scott, and he has 10. So you've got
no kidding.
Your children have some work to do.
Yeah, that's enough.
What about your husband? You know, people say, why do you ask about families? Because being in politics, when you run, the entire family runs. They're all under a microscope. There's a lot of hours that go into it. What about your husband? Who is he, and what does he do?
His name is Sheldon, and I could not have ever done this without him. I mean, he has been totally great as my commission races, and he's just been terrific. He was the CEO of Honeywell.
Really?
And you know, his strength, he's a lawyer, but he actually is very good at strategic planning and marketing. And then he went to teach at the University of South Florida in the graduate program of engineering on strategic planning and marketing. And he retired about 3 years ago and has been very involved in my campaign and in kind of looking at the legal aspects of what I do.
Well, I think that's so important to have a spouse. My wife, Phyllis, I couldn't get near half of what I get accomplished without her being there prodding, pushing, and making sure that it's correct.
Right. I agree. I totally agree. It's great.
What are your aspirations for this office? What would you like to see? I'm going to ask you that a little later.
Okay.
Because I want you to tell the people what you want to see. What made you decide to run for Supervisor of Elections, though?
Well, I decided to run for Supervisor of Elections because I got angry. I really believe in good government. Growing up in Connecticut, I used to win I Speak for Democracy contests, and I believe that the way to really influence what happens, you can do a great deal of work, you can be a terrific candidate, but if your vote isn't counted, then it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah, and I find it so hard to understand why you can't count a vote. You know, well, so many of these supervisor elections all over the state, and then Florida became a laughingstock a couple of years ago because of our inability to count votes.
Well, you know, Bill, it's really complicated. It's much more complicated than you tend to think it is. We have something like 1,215 different ballots. I mean, that's a lot for a population of that votes of almost 650,000. So you have to store them properly, and we have very, very little storage in Hillsborough County. Our storage needs have grown 5 times since when we started doing this 20 years ago.
Really?
The paper ballots are huge, and you have a 4-page ballot now because part of it, you know, it's also in Spanish.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a minute,
We will.
too.
So you got to store them properly, and it's complicated. And so I think that that's a problem sometimes in voting accurately. I believe that we can and will vote and have an accurate vote. I totally believe that. I believe we will be one
Sometime
of
in
the
a
best.
reasonable, after
In a
people vote,
reasonable
it'll
time.
actually get
Yeah,
posted.
absolutely. It took me 3 days to know I was elected. I mean, do you realize that? 3 days. I had this party, right?
Right,
on
everybody
election
celebrates.
night, and no one ate my cake, and it was a gorgeous cake, and I didn't have an appetite. I didn't want to eat my cake. We
Had
didn't
to wait
know.
3 days to eat the cake.
3
The cake
days.
get pretty stale.
Actually, I gave it away, but truthfully. But yes, of course, I think we're going to do much better, really.
By the way, I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit, but I
Sure.
want to go back to the family. Tell the people how long you've been married.
Well, it will be 50 years in September.
Now, my immediate response to that, not kissing up or anything, was you had to be a child when you got married.
I think people look better. First of all, I have really great genes. Like, I look just like my mother at this age. Secondly, you know, I exercise. You take care of yourself. People today, women and men, take better care of themselves. So I see people all the time who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s who look terrific, just terrific.
And
so,
you had probably graduated from college the first time before you got married, right?
yes, I got married when I was 22.
22.
Mhm.
See now we've just told the world how old
It's
you are.
okay.
Those
It's
that can
okay.
add.
I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. I wouldn't want to be anything else.
It
that's
amazes
who I am.
me. You look really great, and you're so vigorous and everything for 72. I like when people will talk about their age because it means that they're proud of themselves, and it's also great for other people to see. You know, when I first moved down here, we came from Ohio, and all of a sudden we moved into an area that had a predominance of senior citizens.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, golly, all those old people. And I found out I couldn't keep up with some of them.
Right, it's true, it's true. Well, one of my real heroes was Claude Pepper, who was in the Senate for, I think, in his 90s. And he was fabulous. And you just look at people around you and you think age isn't really a factor. It's who you are and what you want to do. And I love what I'm doing, so it makes
Well,
it easy.
that shows when we interviewed offset before we started. Your enthusiasm for this whole thing is phenomenal.
Well, we have to make it right, and we're going to.
It's going
and
to
that's
take time.
exciting. Yes, it's going to take time. But I'm a builder. I'm a manager. That's my degree. And I was head of aging services and human resources for the county before I, got into elected office. And that's what I did, is I managed things and built things. So that's what I'm doing now.
Well, let's go back to this storage of all these ballots. The storage of the ballots is one thing, but one of the things that I've never understood in this state is that every supervisor gets to choose their own machine. So there's no consistency of purchase across the state on voting machines. That doesn't make much sense to me.
That was true. But this past year, the state legislature mandated optical scanners.
So, optical scanner?
Now there are three companies that make them. There may be 4. And we have one that we had for a few years, Premier. But everyone has an optical scan machine.
So if I go from Hillsborough to Pinellas to another county, I don't have to learn how to use a different machine?
No, it may be a different name, a different brand, but it's still basically the same machine.
Well, that makes some sense to me. Having all these different kinds of machines throughout the entire state of Florida.
Yeah, it can be confusing for
it would
people
seem
to
to me
move and change.
We could get a better deal on them, too, if the state settled on a particular machine.
Well, you still have at least three different vendors. So it depends on how they're going to how they want to deal with you. Now, we were lucky. We negotiated, when I first came into office, $1.5 million credit from Premier.
Really?
Well, because the election was somewhat flawed, and part of that was their problem. Some of it, not all of it at all. And so the president came down to meet me And we sat down with lawyers and everything and said, look, you have some responsibility here. And they admitted they had some responsibility here, not a lot, but some, and they gave us this $1.5 million credit,
Well,
which was great. We saved
yeah,
the taxpayers' money just right off the bat.
It's great for you, and it's great for them, because that shows that they at least have a public conscience.
Right, and they do.
At least with a lawyer sitting across from them.
Right, right.
All right. How long do ballots have to be stored?
22 months.
22 months?
Months,
if
right.
there's no
Doesn't matter.
argument
Someone
about
may
it?
want to check. There may be something. That is just the federal law.
Wow.
22 months. So that's why our warehouse is critical, you know, because you have to have enough space. Now, we have, I think at Hillsborough, we have like 47,000 square feet. You go over to Orlando that has somewhat the same population, maybe a little bit different, but pretty close. They have 97,000 square feet. So you go into their warehouse, and it's, I mean, I never thought
We're bigger than they are, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we are. Yes, we are. I think. We're close. But I never thought I would become eloquent about the need for warehouse space, but it's like going into a library. If you know where your ballots are, and if you can access them on the day of election and get them out and get them back in and move things around, and you have an orderly process, that is part of getting the vote counted.
I imagine just controlling the ballots is a big thing, because
we're very
the security
careful.
of it.
Oh yeah, we're very, very careful. I mean, they're barcoded, they're in special, I mean, we don't fool around with that at all.
Does the warehouse space have to be hermetically controlled?
No, it doesn't. Although I worry about hurricanes, and we're going to be looking at what we're going to do about a hurricane, because I don't think the roof is going to be strong enough if a major hurricane comes over. So we're looking at that in our budget.
Well, let's hope that God spares us that.
So knock on wood.
We don't need that now.
Right, right. No, no, no.
How is your office set up?
Well, we really have two offices.
Okay.
One is downtown in the Fred Carl Center, and that's more or less the administration office or administrative office. Although people can register to vote, get absentee ballots, and do basic functions there. But the basic operations piece of it and the technological piece is really at the Gilder Center in Brandon. Now, it used to be called the Falkenberg Center because it's on Falkenberg Road. But the Gilder, it was named after Bob Gilder, who was a tremendous activist and really believed in good voting and good government. So we had a ceremony 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and named it the Gilder Center. So that's where the second part of the office is, where the machines are, where the warehouses are, and where people can also come in and register and vote.
How many people are involved on a day-to-day basis with your office, and then what does it swell to once we get into an election cycle?
Well, you know, you've done your homework. It is amazing. We have like 35, 36 people, right, year-round. It's like being in Iraq and having the surge, I think, often. I think it will be, because all of a sudden, 3 months before, you hire 4,000 people. They come in.
4,000 people?
4,000 people come in. It's amazing.
Wow.
Right.
And these are all actually paid, correct?
They are. They're paid for their it depends. They're paid for their poll workers. I mean, the poll workers, we just need them, and they are paid.
Okay.
There is a different kinds of functions within a poll, working at a poll, but they are all paid. Now, they're paid for poll working, for the election day and early voting. But then you have to hire people for telephone banks, and you have to train them. And you have to hire people for moving the ballot boxes out and in, and you have to drop site them into places. It's huge. It's just a huge, once it gets going, it ramps up, and then it's enormous, you know.
Phyllis, how much before an election do you have to start doing this, or are you already doing it for the next election?
Well, we're getting ready. I think it's about, because this is my first election, I know we're going to be starting in October. And I know we're recruiting poll workers. If anyone wants to be one, they should
call the number on the screen?
Absolutely. And say that they want to, and we'll be starting to look at that in October. But meanwhile, right now, we're looking at sites, because you have something over 350 precincts, so you need sites for each of, you know, these polls. And
churches,
that's a hard
schools,
thing. Churches,
whatever.
schools. Well, schools are hard to get because people go in and out, so they're not really open all day. We don't do many schools. libraries, that kind of thing.
I noticed that several churches in Sun City
There
are
are,
used.
right, there are churches, yeah. And for early voting, you have them basically only in libraries.
Boy, I like that early voting. Let's talk about that for just a second. I want to jump around again because
Sure.
early voting is something that's very near and dear to my heart. But let's keep off that for a second and go back to the people who call. People who want to work at the polls or be a part of this should now call your office.
And they can leave their name, address, and phone number and say, I'd like to get involved in the polls, right, and working at the polls. Or
Is there a lot of training that goes with it?
Well, at least a day. And we're going to do a lot of it on the website. I mean, we're redoing the whole training module because it's very important that our poll workers know, and we've had some great ones, but it's changed, and it's very important that everyone be on the same page. And the clerks have a tremendous responsibility. There's a clerk, an assistant clerk, you know, a technician in that, but they have a tremendous responsibility. And so the training is going to be longer, I think. It was 2 or 3 hours. I think it's going to be at least 4 or 5 or 6 hours.
Also, how are they paid?
How are they paid?
How are they paid? Somebody talked about being paid the same day, and that seemed to me to be very inefficient.
Well, actually, it can't. We are now doing it. We're doing it. We immediately, when I took office, took our finances and moved them back to the clerk of the circuit court. And they can pay them the day they work if we think it's appropriate. And it isn't really that inefficient. I don't think it's that efficient either. We're going to take a look at it and see if that's
It would
really
be easier to mail out checks than have all these checks going out all over the county.
Right. And then you can be more accountable. You can hold people. Because they are very accountable people, the people who do this. But I think it might be better to mail them out. It's a question of 2 weeks. The difference is 2 to 3 weeks. We can do them. If we, our office, get them to the clerk, it can be done in 2 or 3 weeks. And so it's the responsibility of our office to do that.
I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. I'm sure there are people saying, I want my money today.
Yeah, but I'll tell you,
come on, folks. It costs money to do that.
Right.
And in this austerity mode that we're in, we've got to watch every penny, don't you believe?
I believe, but there are some people, Bill, who haven't picked up their checks.
Really?
Yeah, not a lot.
Those are the true volunteers.
Those are, and we have a lot of true volunteers. I mean, people are wonderful about volunteering. And so when we ask for 4,000 people to volunteer, I think we'll get them.
Let's talk about early voting.
Okay.
I love the idea of early voting. I think having a period of time that one can go in and vote over just a single day is so much more intelligent than saying everybody has to line up on one day.
I totally agree with you. I think it's terrific. And I actually don't believe we have a voting day anymore. In Hillsborough County, I believe 51% of the people who voted voted early voting or by mail, absentee. And I believe we have voting weeks and they're voting days, and I think there are 10 or 12 days. I don't know what the legislature is going to do this year. And those are just voting days. If you're a candidate, you got to get ready. I mean, you've got to do your ads and your grassroots stuff by the first day that early voting or voting starts, and then it goes through. I think it's excellent. I really like it.
I don't believe, since I started voting, that I've ever missed an election that I had an opportunity to vote. So I take voting very, very seriously. And quite honestly, with my travel schedule, with the training that I do for corporations, and I'm never sure where my consulting schedule will take me, for the last several years, I've got an absentee ballot because I just wasn't absolutely sure that on that day I could be there. Now, early voting gives me some window, it gives me a little flexibility.
It does, and I think it's great. And look at the number of people who voted either that way. The majority have voted early voting, and then there are vote by mail. But I think it's terrific. I think it's a great convenience, and I think it opens up. And that's one of the goals of our office, is to kind of keep opening up the election process.
Get
to make
people
it accessible.
to vote.
Right.
Yeah.
We want people to vote.
Some people say, well, they don't care enough to vote, shouldn't be voting. But, you know, this way this country is set up is that everybody gets to vote, no matter how silly I may think they are,
right, and
or how much I disagree with them. They have a right to express that opinion.
They do. And the fact of the matter is, these positions that people are voting for are critical. I mean, look at county commissioner, local government. I mean, these people make decisions on roads, they make decisions on some of your taxes, they make decisions on your social services. on your, property. I mean, there are huge, major decisions that a Board of County Commissioners makes. And so it's not silly to try and get those people to vote and to explain to them why they should. Then it's up to them, not to really get them, but it's up to them. But these are critical decisions.
Well, you point that out, and that's very, very true. We're living through this drought period now with all the expansion and building that the Board of County Commissioners allowed to happen during times when we had lots of money and lots of water. And nobody really looked down line and said, wait a minute, can we actually support all these people? So every vote counts.
Every vote
every
does
time
count.
we look at somebody, it's not the action they do just today, it's what they're doing in the future.
You're absolutely right. And there are very close elections. I mean, Rose Ferlita won by 4 votes, I think, or something like that.
So every person counts.
Yeah, I mean, when I ran for office, there's that line of 10 items or less, the line in the supermarket, and once I got in and I had 11, and I really broke into a cold sweat. I thought, oh my God, right? Because one of my voters I didn't mean to do that, might, say, oh, look at her.
She cheats.
She cheats, and that is really key. So you don't want to lose by one. I mean, it's a hard kind of election process.
Political life is really different than everything else. You continue to audition for your next job every day you walk in there.
You do.
There's no seniority. Every year you have to face the voters, or every 2 years or 4 years or whatever. And just something little, some little silly thing that most of us would laugh off and go on, becomes a campaign issue.
Yeah, I would never laugh it off. I don't laugh any of that off. I think you have to be straight and open and very straightforward about what you do. And sometimes people make mistakes, but basically you have to be careful.
One question that a lot of people have mentioned to me, because I very firmly believe the United States should have an official language. That does not preclude anyone from speaking any language they want. But I think the government should do business in a language, mostly because I was born in Canada, and the English-French split up there has caused great problems. And I don't want to see that happen in this country. I remember in the Bible where if God wanted to confuse us, he had the Tower of Babel, and everybody spoke different languages and couldn't continue the building of it. And we need a language. But I go down to vote, and you mentioned going from 2 pages to 4, but part of that is because we have to print it in Spanish too. Is there a requirement for printing a ballot in the United States in a foreign language?
Yes, there is, actually, and it comes under the Voting Acts, the Voting Act rights. And there's a tipping point, a percentage of your population. If a percentage cannot or is not going to be speaking English necessarily, or reading English, then you are required to have the ballot made available. In Hillsborough, it's Spanish. In Miami-Dade, they've got 4 or 5 different languages. I mean, I haven't looked into how long that ballot is, but there are a lot of, there are 2 or 3 Asian ballots that, names that are put up. And so I think it's okay. I mean, some people speak English and can't read that much, although the naturalization process requires some of that. So if that helps people make the choice,
to go vote or not?
God go with them. Let them make the choice and vote, right?
Well, like I say, and don't write me. There's going to be some Spanish. I have nothing against the Spanish language. I am learning it. I love it. I think it's a beautiful language. But I think we need one language in the United States in which to do government business. Now, companies that want to put up their bulletins or ads in something else, that's just fine with me. I got no problem.
But I think we do have one language to do government business. I actually do.
Well,
this is the people's business, which is how they vote and how they understand who they're voting for.
Okay.
I guess that's the distinction I would make.
Okay. Let's take just a minute. And I would like you, as supervisor of elections, you're just starting into this job. I'd like you to talk to the people and tell them what your vision is for this year, for next year, and while you're in office.
Well, I think my vision is why I ran, because I wanted to make sure that the votes were accurate, that the counting of the votes, that they were counted accurately, that every single vote counted, whether it be by mail, whether it be early voting, or on the day of voting. And I wanted to make sure that there was really strong customer service, that people felt that whatever questions they asked, they would be answered, that they had a right to ask those questions, that it was an open kind of atmosphere in this office. And I really want this office to be, at the end of 4 years, the best in the country. And I think we can be. I mean, it's a great team that we have, and we are building an organization that's terrific.
Well, you put together some very good people.
And I had them. I mean, many of the people there are people I've had, and they're just, they really are good government people. They stay there because they're good government people.
And it's going to take time to put the right people in office.
It always does. It always does.
It amazes me, all the people that are critical of the Obama administration because they don't have all the jobs filled yet.
No,
and yet they've made the vetting process 3 times what it was before, and we'll have better people if we wait longer. You know, we can't even wait for a hamburger anymore. We run in and it's got to be all prepared and done.
Right, right. Well, right now the county, we have to wait because the county has really basically has a hiring freeze, and we're not hiring at this point, except for this group of people that will come in, that we will be hiring temporary workers.
So we want to encourage people who are interested in working at the polls to call your office at the number we're showing.
And if they want to do phone banks for us and answer the phones on election, if they want to help us find sites, those are the kind of people we need right now. Probably in October we'll start really
ramping up and really
ramping up, right.
It's got to be almost like tax time when you start doing that.
I think it's like Federal Express. You got one vote is a package, right? And you got to get it, you got to understand it, you got to safeguard it, and you got to get it to the right person.
Phyllis,
and that's 653,000.
We've run out of time.
Okay.
I hate to cut you off.
That's okay.
I'm Bill Hodges. This is Spotlight on Government with Phyllis Busansky, the supervisor of elections. You're unique, you're special, you're great. Tell yourself so often because you are, you know. And we'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government. Again, Phyllis, thank you for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.